The dust cloud rose behind the broken wagon like smoke from a dying fire, and Yates Langston could tell from half a mile away that whoever was stranded out there in the Colorado Territory heat was in serious trouble. It was August of 1878, and the sun beat down on the prairie with relentless fury. Yates had been riding the fence line of his ranch just outside Salida, checking for breaks and making sure none of his cattle had wandered too far toward the Arkansas River. At 26 years old, he had been running the Langston Ranch for 4 years since his father passed, and he knew every inch of this land like he knew his own reflection. When he spotted that wagon tilted at an odd angle near the old trading road, his instincts kicked in immediately. He urged his horse forward, a sturdy bay mare named Copper, and covered the distance quickly. As he approached, he could see a woman standing beside the wagon, her traveling dress covered in dust, her dark hair falling loose from what had probably been a neat arrangement that morning. She was young, maybe early 20s, and even from a distance he could see the frustration etched across her features as she stared at the broken wheel. "Afternoon, miss," Yates called out as he brought Copper to a stop a respectful distance away. He removed his hat, wiping the sweat from his brow with his sleeve. "Looks like you have found yourself in a predicament." The woman turned to face him, and Yates felt something shift in his chest. She had striking green eyes that caught the sunlight, and despite the obvious distress of her situation, she held herself with a dignity that commanded respect. Dirt smudged her cheek, and her hands were covered in grime from obviously trying to fix the wheel herself. "That would be an understatement, sir," she said, her voice carrying a slight tremor that she was clearly trying to hide. "The wheel caught in a rut about an hour ago, and the axle broke clean through. I have been trying to figure out how to repair it, but I fear I lack both the tools and the knowledge." Yates dismounted and approached the wagon, keeping his movements slow and unthreatening. He knew a woman alone on the prairie had every reason to be cautious around strangers. "Name is Yates Langston. I run a ranch about 3 miles east of here. Mind if I take a look?" The woman hesitated for just a moment before nodding. "Sarah Anderson. I was traveling to Salida to meet my brother. He sent for me 2 months ago, said he had established a general store there and needed help running it. I took the train as far as I could, then bought this wagon and supplies in Pueblo." She gestured helplessly at the broken wheel. "I suppose I should have hired someone to drive me, but I thought I could manage on my own." "Nothing wrong with self-reliance," Yates said, crouching down to examine the damage. The axle had indeed snapped, and the wheel itself had splintered in several places. This was not something that could be fixed with a quick repair on the side of the road. But this is going to need more than a quick patch. The axle needs to be replaced entirely, and that wheel is not going to hold even if we get it back on. Sarah's face fell, and for the first time he saw real fear flicker in those green eyes. "How far did you say your ranch was?" 3 miles, give or take. I have got tools there, spare lumber, everything we would need to fix this proper." He stood, dusting off his hands on his worn denim pants. "But there is no way this wagon is moving on its own. I can ride back, bring a team of horses and some supplies, but that is going to take the better part of the afternoon." "I could not possibly ask you to go to such trouble," Sarah protested, though her voice lacked conviction. She glanced around at the empty prairie stretching in all directions, at the sun already beginning its slow descent toward the western horizon. "Though I confess I am not sure what other options I have." "Out here, we help each other," Yates said simply. "It is not about asking or owing. It is about making sure folks do not end up in worse trouble than they already are." He looked up at the sky, calculating. "Tell you what, my ranch is closer than Salida by a good measure. Why do not I take you there, get you settled somewhere safe and comfortable, then come back with what we need to fix this wagon proper. We can work on it tomorrow morning when it is cooler and we have got good light." Sarah bit her lip, clearly weighing her options. Yates could see the internal struggle playing out across her face. She did not know him, had no reason to trust him, but she also had few alternatives. The prairie was no place to spend a night alone, especially for a woman traveling without protection. "I promise you will be perfectly safe," Yates added quietly. "My ranch hand, Marcus, and his wife, Clara, live in a cabin on the property. Clara would be happy to have you stay with them tonight, I am certain. She is always complaining about being the only woman around for miles." Something in his tone must have reassured her because Sarah finally nodded. "I suppose I have little choice. Thank you, Mr. Langston. I am grateful for your help, truly. Just Yates is fine." He moved to the back of the wagon. "You have got belongings in here you will need." Sarah joined him, and together they sorted through her things. She had packed practically, he noticed, with clothes and personal items, but also books, ledgers, and what looked like accounting materials. Smart woman, he thought, coming prepared to actually work rather than expecting an easy life. She pulled out a carpet bag with her essentials, and Yates secured the rest as best he could. "What about the rest?" Sarah asked, looking worried. "Will it be safe here overnight? Honestly, probably. Not many folks come through this way, and those who do are generally decent people. But I will make sure to come back before dark, maybe move the wagon off the road a bit, cover it with a tarp." He could see her about to protest again. "It is no trouble, Sarah. Really." The sound of her name on his lips made her look up, and their eyes met for a long moment. Yates felt that strange flutter in his chest again, stronger this time. He cleared his throat and turned to Copper. "You ever ridden a horse before?" "A few times when I was younger," Sarah admitted, "though never very far." "Well, Copper here is gentle as they come. I will ride behind you, make sure you do not fall off." He swung up into the saddle, then reached down to help her up. Sarah took his hand, and even through the leather of his work gloves, he could feel the warmth of her grip. She settled in front of him, sitting side saddle as best she could, and Yates tried to ignore how aware he was of her closeness, the faint scent of lavender that clung to her hair despite the dust of travel. They rode in silence for the first mile, Yates keeping Copper at a steady walk. Sarah held herself stiffly at first, clearly uncomfortable with the intimacy of their arrangement, but gradually she relaxed. "So your brother is in Salida?" Yates asked, more to break the silence than anything else. "Yes, Stephen Anderson. He opened a general store on Front Street about 6 months ago. He wrote that business was good, but that he needed someone he could trust to help manage the books and the inventory." Sarah shifted slightly, adjusting her bag. "Our parents passed 2 years ago, and Stephen decided he wanted a fresh start out west. I stayed in St. Louis, working as a bookkeeper for a shipping company, but when his letters became more insistent, I decided it was time for my own fresh start." "Salida is a good town," Yates said. "Growing fast with the railroad coming through. Your brother picked a smart location for a store." "You know him?" Sarah sounded surprised. "If his store is the one I am thinking of, sure. Bought supplies there last month. Tall fellow, dark hair, friendly enough." At Sarah's nod, Yates continued. "He mentioned having a sister back east, said he hoped she would join him. I suppose that would be you." "It would." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "He did not know I was coming. I wanted to surprise him. I wrote that I was considering it, but I never sent a letter confirming my plans. I suppose now I will be later than anticipated." "Only by a day or so," Yates assured her. "We will get your wagon fixed up, and you will be on your way before you know it." Sarah turned her head slightly, and Yates found himself looking down at her profile, at the determined set of her jaw and the way the sunlight caught in her hair. Why are you helping me? You do not know me. For all you know, I could be nothing but trouble. Could ask you the same. For all you know, I could be leading you somewhere dangerous instead of to help." He paused, then added more seriously, "But I guess I am helping because it is the right thing to do. My father raised me to believe that out here, we are all we have got. Town is too far away to rely on law or organized help most of the time. So we look after each other. And as for you not knowing me, well, I guess you are taking a leap of faith. I aim to prove that faith is not misplaced." "I believe you," Sarah said softly, and Yates felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon heat. The Langston ranch came into view as they crested a low rise. It was not the biggest spread in the territory, but it was well maintained and prosperous. The main house was a sturdy two-story structure built from local timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around three sides. To the left sat the bunkhouse and barn, both in good repair, and beyond that were corrals and grazing pastures where cattle dotted the landscape. A smaller cabin sat on the far side of the property, smoke rising from its chimney. "That is Marcus and Clara's place," Yates said, pointing to the cabin. "Let me take you there first. Clara is going to be beside herself with excitement at having another woman to talk to." They rode toward the cabin, and before they even reached it, the door opened and a woman stepped out onto the porch. Clara was in her early 30s, with warm brown skin and kind eyes that lit up when she saw Sarah. "Yates Langston, you better have a good explanation for bringing a lady home on your horse looking like she has been dragged through the dirt," Clara called out, though her tone was teasing rather than critical. Yates dismounted first, then helped Sarah down. "Found her with a broken wagon about 3 miles west. This is Sarah Anderson, heading to Salida to join her brother. Sarah, this is Clara Thompson. She and Marcus help run this place, though honestly, I think she does more work than both of us combined." Clara laughed and came down from the porch, immediately taking Sarah's hands in hers. "Oh, you poor thing. Come inside right now. You look exhausted and half-starved. Marcus just went to check on the north pasture, but he will be back before supper. You will stay with us tonight, of course." "I will not hear any arguments." Sarah looked almost overcome with emotion at the warm welcome. "Thank you. I do not want to impose." "Impose? Honey, you are doing me a favor. Do you know how boring it gets talking to only these two men day after day?" Clara was already leading Sarah toward the cabin. "We have got a spare room, and I will heat some water so you can wash up. Yates, you make yourself useful and let Marcus know we have a guest when he gets back, and make sure there is enough food for everyone at supper." "Yes, madam," Yates said with a grin. Clara had a way of taking charge that brooked no argument, and he appreciated it now more than ever. He watched as the two women disappeared into the cabin, then headed back to the main house to take care of the horses and prepare for the evening ahead. As he unsaddled Copper and brushed her down, Yates found his thoughts returning again and again to Sarah Anderson. There was something about her that had gotten under his skin in the space of a single afternoon. Maybe it was the way she had tried to fix that wagon herself before accepting help. Maybe it was the vulnerability he had glimpsed beneath her composed exterior. Or maybe it was simply the way she looked at him, like she could see past the rough exterior of a rancher to something more underneath. He shook his head, trying to clear those thoughts. She was passing through, nothing more. In a day or two, her wagon would be fixed and she would be on her way to Salida to start her new life with her brother. Whatever this feeling was, he needed to push it aside and focus on being helpful, nothing more. But even as he told himself that, Yates could not quite shake the memory of how right it had felt to have Sarah sitting in front of him on that horse, or the sound of her voice when she said she believed him. That evening, the four of them gathered around Clara and Marcus's table for supper. Marcus had returned from the pasture full of questions about the broken wagon, and he and Yates made plans to head out first thing in the morning with tools and supplies to make the repairs. Marcus was a solid man in his early 30s, with dark hair beginning to gray at the temples and strong hands that showed years of hard work. He had come to work for Yates's father 10 years earlier and had proven himself invaluable time and again. When Marcus married Clara 5 years ago, Yates had been happy to build them their own cabin on the property, and they had become more like family than employees. "So you are Stephen Anderson's sister," Marcus said, passing Sarah a bowl of stew. "He has spoken about you. Said you were the smart one in the family, always good with numbers." Sarah ducked her head, clearly pleased but embarrassed. "Stephen exaggerates. But yes, I have always had a head for figures and organization. I am looking forward to helping him with the store." "Salida needs a good general store," Clara said. "The old one was barely hanging on before your brother opened his place. Now folks actually have decent selection and fair prices." They talked easily through the meal, and Yates found himself content to mostly listen, watching the way Sarah gradually relaxed in the warm atmosphere Clara created. She laughed at Marcus's stories about stubborn cattle and asked intelligent questions about ranch life that showed genuine interest rather than polite pretense. When the meal ended, Clara shooed the men away while she and Sarah cleaned up, and Yates and Marcus retreated to the porch with cups of coffee. "She seems nice," Marcus said casually, but there was a knowing look in his eyes. "She does," Yates agreed carefully. "Pretty too. I had not noticed." Marcus laughed outright at that. "You are a terrible liar, boss. I saw the way you were looking at her during supper." Yates sighed and took a long sip of his coffee. "Does not matter how I look at her. She will be gone in a couple of days. Maybe." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Or maybe not. Salida is not that far, and her brother is someone you do business with regular. Seems to me there might be opportunities to see her again if a man was so inclined." "You are worse than an old matchmaking grandmother," Yates grumbled, but there was no heat in it. "Clara says the same thing." Marcus grinned. "But seriously, Yates, you have been alone since your father passed. Devoted all your time to this ranch, which is admirable, but you are still a young man. Would not hurt to let yourself be interested in someone." Before Yates could respond, the cabin door opened, and the two women emerged. Sarah looked transformed from the dusty, exhausted traveler he had found that afternoon. She had washed and changed into a simple dress, her dark hair pulled back in a neat braid, and there was color in her cheeks from the warmth of the cabin and the good meal. "I was just telling Sarah about the dance they are planning in Salida next month," Clara said, settling into a chair beside Marcus. "For the town's 5th anniversary. Should be quite the celebration. If you are still in town by then, you should go," Yates found himself saying before he could think better of it. "It would be a good way to meet people, make friends." Sarah's eyes found his in the lamplight spilling from the cabin windows. "You usually attend such events?" "Sometimes. If I can spare the time away from the ranch." He paused. "Though I suppose for something like a town anniversary, I should make the effort." Something passed between them in that look, an understanding or acknowledgement that neither voiced but both felt. Clara caught it too, if her satisfied smile was any indication, and Yates knew he was going to hear about this later. They talked for another hour as the stars came out overhead, the conversation ranging from local politics to the challenges of frontier life to shared memories of cities back east. Sarah spoke fondly of St. Louis, but without any apparent desire to return, and Yates found himself hoping she would find Colorado territory to her liking. Eventually, Clara declared it time for everyone to get some rest, especially since the men would be heading out early to fix the wagon. Sarah thanked them all profusely for their kindness, and Yates said good night, walking back to the main house through the darkness. Sleep did not come easily that night. He kept thinking about Sarah, about the way she laughed and the intelligence in her eyes and the courage it must have taken to travel all this way alone. He told himself again that it was foolish to get attached, that she was just passing through, but his heart did not seem to be listening to his head. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Yates was up before sunrise, preparing the wagon and loading it with tools and a spare axle he had in storage. Marcus joined him just as the sun was peeking over the eastern horizon, and together they hitched up a team of horses. Sarah emerged from the cabin as they were finishing preparations, still dressed in the simple dress from the night before. She carried a basket that Clara appeared to have packed with food for the day. "Clara insisted you would need lunch," Sarah said, handing the basket to Marcus. "And she said to tell you she expects the wagon back here by afternoon so I can load my things." "We will have it done," Yates promised. He helped Sarah up onto the wagon seat, and once again they were off across the prairie, though this time with Marcus and proper equipment. The work at the broken wagon site was hot and challenging, but between the three of them, they made steady progress. Sarah proved herself handy with tools, holding pieces in place and helping leverage the wagon up so they could work on the axle. By early afternoon, they had the new axle installed and a repaired wheel back in place. "We should test it with some weight before loading all your belongings," Yates said, examining their work critically. "I will ride in it back to your ranch," Sarah offered. "That should tell us if it is holding properly." They made the journey slowly, watching the wheel carefully, but the repair held solid. By the time they reached the Langston ranch, Yates was confident the wagon would make it the rest of the way to Salida without issue. Clara had prepared a feast for lunch, insisting they all needed proper food after working so hard in the heat. As they ate, Sarah grew quieter, and Yates realized she was preparing herself to say goodbye. The thought sat heavy in his stomach. After the meal, they loaded Sarah's belongings back into the wagon, securing everything carefully. Marcus and Clara made themselves scarce, finding sudden tasks that needed attending to elsewhere, leaving Yates and Sarah alone by the wagon. "I cannot thank you enough," Sarah said, looking up at him with those striking green eyes. "If you had not come along when you did, I do not know what I would have done." "You would have figured something out," Yates said. "You are resourceful. I could tell that from the start. Still, your kindness means more than I can say." She paused, seeming to struggle with something. "Yates, I know we have only just met, but I wondered if perhaps you might visit the general store sometime. Stephen would want to thank you properly, and I would like to see you again. As friends, I mean." "To thank you properly for your help." Yates felt his heart lift. "I usually make it into Salida once or twice a month for supplies. I could stop by the store next time I am in town. I would like that." Sarah smiled, and it transformed her whole face. "And perhaps that dance next month if you were serious about attending." "I was serious." He found himself returning her smile. "I would be honored if you would save me a dance. Consider it saved." They stood there for another moment, neither quite ready to end the conversation, until finally Sarah squared her shoulders and climbed up onto the wagon seat. Yates handed her the reins, making sure she had them properly arranged. "The road from here to Salida is well traveled and safe," he told her. "But if you have any trouble at all, you turn right back around and come here. Understand?" "I understand. But I think I will be fine now, thanks to you." Yates stepped back, and Sarah clicked her tongue, urging the horses forward. He watched as the wagon rolled away, growing smaller in the distance, until finally it disappeared over a rise. Only then did he turn back to find Clara and Marcus both watching him with knowing expressions. "Not a word," he warned them. "Would not dream of it, boss," Marcus said, but he was grinning. The next week passed slowly for Yates. He threw himself into ranch work, repairing fences and moving cattle and doing all the countless tasks that running a ranch required. But in the quiet moments, his thoughts kept drifting back to Sarah. He wondered if she had made it safely to Salida, if her brother had been happy to see her, if she was settling into her new life. On the 10th day after Sarah had left, Yates finally decided he had legitimate enough reasons to make a trip into town. They needed supplies anyway, and it would be sensible to check on whether the wagon repairs had held. That was all this was, he told himself. Just being thorough. Marcus saw right through him. "Tell Sarah I said hello," he called out as Yates rode off, and Yates did not dignify that with a response. Salida was bustling when he arrived late that morning. The town had grown considerably in recent years, sprouting up along the Arkansas River with the promise of the railroad bringing prosperity. Front Street was lined with businesses, and Yates had no trouble locating Anderson's General Store about halfway down the main thoroughfare. He tied Copper to the hitching post outside and stepped through the door, a bell chiming to announce his arrival. The store was well stocked and organized, with everything from dry goods to hardware to bolts of fabric arranged in neat sections. Behind the counter stood a man Yates recognized as Stephen Anderson, currently helping an older woman with her purchase. Stephen looked up at the sound of the bell and smiled in recognition. "Mr. Langston, good to see you. I will be with you in just a moment." Yates nodded and wandered the store, looking at the inventory while he waited. He heard footsteps on the stairs at the back of the shop and turned to see Sarah descending, her arms full of ledgers. She froze when she saw him, surprise and pleasure warring on her face. "Yates," she said, and he loved the way his name sounded in her voice. "I did not expect to see you so soon. Needed supplies," he said, which was true enough. "And I wanted to make sure the wagon held up on the rest of your journey. It was perfect, no problems at all. Your repair work was excellent." She set the ledgers down on a side table and came closer. "I am so glad you came. Stephen has been wanting to thank you properly." By this time, Stephen had finished with his customer and came over to join them, extending his hand to Yates. "Mr. Langston, my sister told me what you did for her. I am deeply grateful. If you had not come along when you did, she could have been in serious danger." "Just helped out a fellow traveler," Yates said, shaking the offered hand. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone," Stephen said firmly. "And I insist you let me repay you somehow. Whatever supplies you need today, they are on the house." "That is not necessary." "Perhaps not, but I insist, and I hope you will let us repay your hospitality as well. Sarah and I live upstairs, and we would be honored if you would join us for dinner tonight. It is the least we can do." Yates looked at Sarah, who was nodding encouragement. "I would like that," he heard himself say. "Thank you." They arranged a time, and Yates spent the next few hours taking care of his business in town, but his mind was already on the evening ahead. He found himself stopping by the barber for a shave and a trim, and he brushed the dust from his clothes more carefully than usual. When he returned to the general store that evening, Stephen led him up the stairs to the living quarters above. The space was modest but comfortable, with evidence of Sarah's organizing touch everywhere. The smell of cooking filled the air, and Yates realized Sarah had been preparing the meal herself. "I hope you like roast chicken," Sarah said, wiping her hands on her apron as she greeted him. "It is not fancy, but it is what I know how to make well." "Smells wonderful," Yates assured her, and he meant it. The dinner was excellent, and the conversation flowed easily. Stephen was curious about ranch life, asking detailed questions about managing livestock and land, while Sarah listened intently, occasionally asking questions of her own. Yates found himself talking more than usual, drawn out by their genuine interest. After the meal, Stephen excused himself, claiming he needed to go over inventory lists, though his departure felt calculated to give Yates and Sarah time alone. They moved to sit by the window overlooking Front Street, watching the town settle in for the evening. "Your brother is not very subtle," Yates observed with a smile. Sarah laughed. "No, he is not. He has been insufferable since I told him about you, insisting I should encourage your attention. I am sorry if it makes you uncomfortable." "It does not," Yates said honestly. He turned to face her more fully. "Sarah, I know we barely know each other, but I have not been able to stop thinking about you since you left the ranch. Would you object if I came calling on you, properly, I mean?" Sarah's face lit up with a smile that made Yates's heart race. "I would not object at all. In fact, I was hoping you might. Then I will come again soon, as often as I can spare the time away from the ranch." He paused, then added, "And I meant what I said about that dance next month. I would be honored if you would attend with me." "Yes," Sarah said simply. "I would love to." They talked for another hour, sharing more about their lives and their hopes for the future. Yates learned that Sarah had always dreamed of running her own business someday, that she loved reading and had packed more books than clothes for her journey west. Sarah learned that Yates had studied agriculture back east before returning to help his father with the ranch, that he loved this land with a fierce devotion, but sometimes felt lonely in his dedication to it. When Yates finally took his leave, riding back toward the ranch under a sky full of stars, he felt lighter than he had in years. There was something building between him and Sarah, something that felt important and real, and he found himself already counting the days until he could see her again. True to his word, Yates found reasons to visit Salader regularly over the following weeks. Sometimes he had legitimate business in town, but more often than not, he was simply making excuses to see Sarah. They would walk together along the river when she had free time, or sit in the small park in the center of town, talking about everything and nothing. Marcus and Clara watched this courtship with undisguised approval. "About time you found someone," Clara told him one evening. "That ranch needs a woman's touch, and you need someone to share it with." "We are not that far along yet," Yates protested, but he could not hide his smile. "You will be," Clara said confidently. "That girl looks at you the way Marcus looks at my cooking. Like you are exactly what she did not know she needed." The night of the town dance arrived, and Yates found himself more nervous than he had been in years. He dressed in his best clothes, dark trousers and a clean white shirt with a vest, and made the ride into Salada with his heart pounding. Sarah was waiting for him outside the general store, and when she stepped into the lamplight, Yates felt his breath catch. She wore a dress of deep green that matched her eyes, her dark hair arranged in an elegant style that must have taken considerable time. She was beautiful, and when she smiled at him, he felt like the luckiest man in Colorado territory. "You look stunning," he said, helping her up into the wagon he had brought for the occasion. "You look quite handsome yourself," Sarah replied, and the blush on her cheeks told him she meant it. The dance was being held in the largest building in town, a warehouse that had been cleared out and decorated for the occasion. It seemed like half the territory had turned out for the celebration, and the space was packed with people dressed in their finest, laughing and talking as a small band tuned their instruments on a makeshift stage. Yates kept Sarah close as they made their way through the crowd, introducing her to people he knew and watching with pride as she charmed everyone she met. She had a natural warmth and intelligence that drew people in, and Yates could see that she was going to fit into this community beautifully. When the music started, Yates led Sarah onto the dance floor. He was not the most skilled dancer, but he knew the basic steps, and Sarah followed his lead easily. As they moved together to the music, Yates was intensely aware of her hand in his, of how perfectly she fit in his arms. "Are you happy here?" he asked as they swayed to a slower song. "In Salada, I mean. Is it what you hoped it would be?" Sarah looked up at him, her green eyes reflecting the lamplight. "It is more than I hoped for," she said softly. "The town is wonderful. Working with Stephen is everything I wanted, but more than that, I have found something I was not expecting." "What is that?" "You." She said it simply, honestly, and Yates felt his heart expand in his chest. "I did not come west looking for love, Yates. I came looking for a fresh start, for purpose and independence. But then you rode up to my broken wagon and everything changed." "I know the feeling," Yates said, pulling her slightly closer. "I was not looking either. I was content with my ranch and my work, thought that was enough. But you walked into my life and showed me what I was missing." They danced through several more songs, lost in their own world despite the crowd around them. Eventually, they needed air and made their way outside, walking toward the river where it was quieter and cooler. "Sarah," Yates began, then stopped, trying to find the right words. "I know we have only known each other a few weeks, and maybe it is too soon to be saying things like this, but I need you to know how I feel. You are extraordinary. You are brave and smart and kind, and I find myself thinking about you every moment of every day. I think I am falling in love with you, and I needed to tell you that, even if it is too fast or too much." Sarah reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. "It is not too fast, and it is not too much. I am falling in love with you too, Yates. I think I started falling that first day when you appeared out of nowhere like some kind of hero from a story book." Yates leaned down and kissed her then, soft and sweet under the stars, and it felt like coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling, and Yates knew with absolute certainty that this woman was going to change his life forever. They stayed by the river for a long time, talking and planning and dreaming together. Yates told her about his hopes for the ranch, how he wanted to expand and maybe start breeding horses in addition to cattle. Sarah told him about her ideas for the store, about possibly opening a lending library in the back room where people could borrow books. "We make a good team," Sarah said eventually, leaning against his shoulder as they sat on the riverbank. "We do," Yates agreed. "And I want to keep being a team, Sarah. I want to court you properly, give you time to be sure about this about us. But I want you to know that my intentions are serious. I am not playing games or passing time. I want a future with you." "I want that too," Sarah said. "A future together sounds like the best thing I can imagine." The weeks turned into months, and Yates and Sarah's relationship deepened and grew. Yates made the trip to Salada at least twice a week, and Sarah visited the ranch when she could spare time away from the store. Clara and Sarah became close friends, spending hours together talking and laughing, and Marcus would tease Yates good-naturedly about when he was finally going to propose. "I am waiting for the right moment," Yates would say, but the truth was he was simply nervous. He had never done anything like this before, never loved anyone the way he loved Sarah, and he wanted everything to be perfect. That opportunity came in early November, 4 months after they first met. The weather had turned cooler, and the aspens in the mountains were brilliant gold against the deep blue sky. Yates invited Sarah to spend a Sunday at the ranch, promising her a picnic and a ride through the most beautiful part of his property. They rode out together that morning, Sarah seated on a gentle mare that Yates had been training specifically with her in mind. They followed the Arkansas River upstream, climbing gradually into the foothills, until they reached a meadow that Yates had always considered one of the most beautiful spots on his land. The grass was golden in the autumn light, and the river ran clear and cold beside them. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow. They spread a blanket and unpacked the picnic Clara had helped Yates prepare, eating and talking and enjoying the perfect weather. After they finished eating, Yates took Sarah's hand and pulled her to her feet. "There is something I want to show you," he said, leading her to a slight rise that overlooked the entire valley. From this vantage point, they could see for miles. The ranch was visible in the distance, along with the ribbon of road that led to Salida. The whole world seemed spread out before them, full of possibility and promise. "This is my favorite place on the entire ranch," Yates said. "I used to come here with my father when I was young. He would stand right here and talk about his dreams for this land, about building something that would last beyond his lifetime." He turned to face Sarah fully. "I have been thinking a lot lately about what I want to build, about what kind of legacy I want to leave. And I have realized that none of it means anything if I do not have you to share it with." Yates reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sarah's eyes went wide, her hand flying to her mouth. "Sarah Anderson, you have changed my entire world. You have shown me what love can be, what partnership looks like, what it means to find someone who challenges you and supports you and makes you want to be better. I cannot imagine my future without you in it." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring with a small diamond. "Will you marry me? Will you build a life here with me, make this ranch our home, and let me spend the rest of my days trying to make you as happy as you have made me?" Tears were streaming down Sarah's face, but she was smiling brighter than Yates had ever seen. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Yates, of course I will marry you. I love you so much and I want all of that. I want to build a life with you to make this place our home. Yes, 1,000 times yes." Yates slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply as the autumn wind whispered through the grass around them. When they finally broke apart, both of them were laughing and crying at the same time. "I cannot wait to tell Stephen," Sarah said, admiring the ring on her hand. "He is going to be so excited. He has been hinting for weeks that you should propose." "Everyone has been hinting," Yates admitted. "Marcus and Clara threatened to propose on my behalf if I waited much longer." They spent the rest of the afternoon in that meadow, making plans and dreaming together. Sarah wanted a small wedding, just family and close friends, sometime in the spring. Yates suggested they could hold it at the ranch, maybe in the yard between the main house and the river. Sarah loved the idea, already imagining how they could decorate the space. "I will need to expand the house," Yates said thoughtfully. "The upstairs could be converted into proper bedrooms, and maybe we could add on to the back for more living space." "I do not need anything grand," Sarah assured him. "Just space for us and maybe someday for children." The thought of children, of a family with Sarah, made Yates's heart swell. "How many children were you thinking?" "As many as we are blessed with," Sarah said with a smile. "Though I always imagined at least 2 or 3. I hated being an only child before Stephen came along, and even then, we were so far apart in age that we were never really playmates." They rode back to the ranch as the sun began to set, and found Marcus and Clara waiting anxiously on the porch of the main house. One look at Sarah's glowing face and the ring on her finger told them everything they needed to know, and Clara let out a whoop of joy before rushing forward to embrace Sarah. "Finally," Clara exclaimed. "I thought you two were going to dance around this forever." "We were taking our time," Sarah said, laughing as Clara admired her ring. Marcus shook Yates's hand firmly, then pulled him into a brief hug. "Congratulations, boss. You are getting yourself an amazing woman." "Do not I know it," Yates agreed, watching as Sarah and Clara chattered excitedly about wedding plans. They celebrated that evening with a special dinner, and when Yates finally took Sarah back to Salida late that night, both of them were exhausted but happy. Stephen met them at the door of the general store, having clearly been watching for their return, and his face broke into a huge smile when Sarah showed him the ring. "It is about time," Stephen said, embracing his sister before shaking Yates's hand. "Welcome to the family, Yates." I could not be happier about this. Over the following months, Yates and Sarah planned their wedding while also planning their future together. Yates began the work of expanding the main house, with Marcus helping and occasional hired workers from town when they needed extra hands. Sarah divided her time between the store and the ranch, bringing her organizational skills to bear on both places. She also brought warmth and life to the ranch house in a way it had not seen since Yates's mother passed when he was young. She filled the windows with curtains she sewed herself, brought in rugs and furniture that made the space feel like a real home rather than just a place to sleep. Clara helped her plant a vegetable garden and flower beds, and by early spring, the Langston ranch looked transformed. The wedding took place on a beautiful day in late April of 1879. The yard had been decorated with wildflowers and ribbons, and chairs were set up facing an arch that Marcus and Yates had built beside the river. The guest list was small but meaningful, including Stephen, Marcus, Clara, and a handful of friends from town and neighboring ranches. Sarah wore a simple white dress that she had modified herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers, and her dark hair was arranged with small white blossoms woven through. When Yates saw her walking toward him on Stephen's arm, he felt tears prick his eyes at how beautiful she looked. The ceremony was performed by the minister from Salida, and it was brief but heartfelt. When they exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other through all the challenges life might bring, Yates meant every word with his whole heart. And when the minister finally pronounced them husband and wife and invited him to kiss his bride, Yates did so with joy and gratitude for this amazing woman who had chosen to share her life with him. The celebration afterward was lively and fun, with food and music and dancing. Clara had outdone herself with the meal, and everyone ate and drank and laughed late into the evening. As the sun began to set, Yates and Sarah slipped away from the party, walking hand in hand toward the river. "Happy?" Yates asked, pulling Sarah close. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Sarah said, resting her head against his chest. "When I set out from St. Louis last summer, I had no idea my life was about to change so completely. I thought I was just going to help Stephen with his store, build a quiet life for myself. Instead, I found everything I did not know I was looking for." "I am the lucky one," Yates said, kissing the top of her head. "You walked into my life and showed me what I had been missing. You made this ranch feel like a real home. You made me feel complete." They stood there together as the stars came out overhead, listening to the sound of the river and the distant laughter from their celebration. And Yates thought about how one chance encounter on a dusty road had led to this perfect moment. The early months of their marriage were a period of adjustment and discovery. Sarah moved into the ranch house permanently, and they fell into a comfortable routine of shared work and companionship. Sarah took over managing the ranch's books and accounts, bringing order to systems that Yates had been managing haphazardly. She also continued helping Stephen with the store 2 or 3 days a week, riding into Salida early in the morning and returning before supper. Yates found himself working harder than ever, driven by a desire to build something worthy of Sarah, to prove that she had made the right choice in marrying him. He expanded the cattle operation and began investing in better breeding stock. He also started training horses seriously, developing a reputation for producing reliable, well-tempered animals. By summer, they had fallen into a pattern that suited them both. They worked hard during the day, but always made time for each other in the evenings, sitting on the porch and talking as the sun set, or taking rides through their favorite parts of the property. In early August, about a year after they first met, Sarah began feeling unwell in the mornings. At first, she dismissed it as something she ate, but when it continued for more than a week, Clara pulled her aside one morning with a knowing look. "Honey, when was the last time you had your monthly?" Clara asked gently. Sarah stopped and thought, then her eyes went wide. I have not." "Oh my goodness, Clara, do you think?" "I think you might be carrying a baby," Clara said with a warm smile, "and I think you should probably go see the doctor in Salida to be sure." Sarah made the trip to town that afternoon, and when she returned to the ranch that evening, Yates could tell immediately that something was different. She had a glow about her, an excitement she could barely contain. "Yates," she said, taking his hands as soon as he came in from the barn. "I have news, wonderful, amazing news." "What is it?" He searched her face, concerned. "Are you all right?" "I am more than all right. I am pregnant, Yates. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Yates could not process what she had said. Then the meaning sank in and joy flooded through him so powerfully he felt dizzy. "A baby? Sarah, are you sure?" The doctor confirmed it. "He thinks I am about 2 months along, which means the baby should come in early March." She was crying happy tears now. "We are going to be parents, Yates. We are going to have a family." Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "This is the best news I have ever received," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sarah, you have already given me so much. A home, a partnership, love, and now this. I cannot believe how blessed I am." They told Marcus and Clara over dinner that night, and Clara cried with happiness while Marcus clapped Yates on the back repeatedly, grinning like a fool. The four of them celebrated late into the evening, making plans and dreaming about the baby who would join their little family in the spring. The following months brought changes as Sarah's pregnancy progressed. Yates became protective to the point of being overbearing, worried about her riding to town or working too hard. Sarah tolerated his fussing with good humor, insisting she was perfectly healthy and capable, but she also allowed him to help her more than she might have otherwise. By winter, her belly had grown round and prominent, and she finally agreed to stop making the trips to Salida, working instead from the ranch on the store's accounts while Stephen managed the day-to-day operations. She spent her days organizing the new nursery they had set up in one of the upstairs bedrooms, sewing tiny clothes and preparing for the baby's arrival. Clara was an invaluable help, having assisted with several births in her life. She taught Sarah what to expect and helped prepare supplies they would need. They arranged for the doctor from Salida to come stay at the ranch when Sarah's time drew near, just to be safe. The baby came on a cold night in early March of 1880. Sarah went into labor just after supper, and the household erupted into controlled chaos. The doctor had arrived 2 days earlier, anticipating the birth was imminent, and he took charge immediately while Yates paced the downstairs floor nervously. Marcus kept him company, trying to distract him with conversation, but Yates could barely focus on anything except the sounds coming from upstairs. Every cry from Sarah made him want to rush up there, but Clara had been firm that he needed to stay out of the way and let them work. After several hours that felt like an eternity, Yates heard a new sound that stopped his heart, a thin, wavering cry that was unmistakably a baby. He froze, looking up at the ceiling, hardly daring to breathe. Moments later, Clara appeared at the top of the stairs, her face glowing with joy. "Yates, come meet your son," she called down. A son. He had a son. Yates took the stairs 2 at a time, nearly stumbling in his haste, and burst into the bedroom to find Sarah propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "Yates," she said softly, looking up at him with tired, happy eyes. "Come meet our boy." Yates approached the bed slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the baby in Sarah's arms. He was tiny and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. Yates felt something crack open in his chest, a rush of love so profound it nearly brought him to his knees. "He is perfect," Yates whispered, reaching out to gently touch his son's tiny hand. The baby's fingers curled around his large, calloused finger instinctively, and Yates felt tears stream down his face. "Sarah, he is absolutely perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" Sarah asked, and carefully transferred the baby into Yates's arms. Yates had never held anything so precious in his entire life. He cradled his son carefully, marveling at how small and fragile he seemed, this tiny life that he and Sarah had created together. The baby opened his eyes briefly, and Yates could see they were the same striking green as Sarah's. "What should we name him?" Sarah asked. They had discussed names but never quite decided. Now, looking down at his son, Yates knew. "What about Matthew, after my father? Matthew Joseph Langston." "Matthew," Sarah repeated, testing the name. "I love it. Matthew Joseph Langston." "Welcome to the world, little one." The household adjusted to life with a baby, and Yates discovered depths of love and patience he had not known he possessed. Matthew was a good baby, generally calm and happy, and watching Sarah with him made Yates fall in love with his wife all over again. She was a natural mother, patient and nurturing, singing lullabies and telling stories even though Matthew was too young to understand. Stephen visited regularly, clearly besotted with his nephew. Clara and Marcus became surrogate aunt and uncle, helping with the baby whenever Sarah and Yates needed a break. The ranch prospered, and life settled into a new rhythm that revolved around Matthew's needs and schedule. When Matthew was 6 months old, Sarah surprised Yates one evening with another announcement. "I think we might need to start preparing that nursery for another occupant," she said, a playful smile on her face. Yates looked up from where he was playing with Matthew on a blanket on the floor. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I am pregnant again. The doctor confirmed it yesterday when I took Matthew in for a checkup." "Sarah, that is wonderful." Yates scooped up Matthew and went to embrace his wife. "Though, are you sure you are ready? Matthew is still so young." "They will be close in age, which means they will be good playmates," Sarah said. "And honestly, I am excited. I always wanted a house full of children." Their daughter Emma was born the following spring in April of 1881. She was small and delicate, with Sarah's dark hair and Yates's blue eyes, and from the moment she entered the world, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Matthew, now a year old and toddling around, was initially uncertain about this new addition but quickly warmed to his baby sister. The house was chaotic and loud and full of love. Yates expanded the operation again, hiring additional ranch hands to help manage the growing herd and the horse training business. Sarah continued managing the books but had to give up her regular work at the store, focusing instead on raising their children. The years passed in a blur of growth and change. Matthew grew into a curious, energetic boy who wanted to help his father with everything on the ranch. Emma was quieter but fiercely intelligent, always asking questions and wanting to know how things worked. When Emma was 2, Sarah gave birth to their third child, another son they named Thomas, and the house felt complete. Yates worked hard to provide for his growing family, but he never forgot to make time for them. He would take Matthew out to help with small chores, teaching him about the land and the animals. He would sit with Emma for hours, answering her endless questions and reading to her from the growing collection of books Sarah had accumulated. And he would walk baby Thomas around the property, talking to him about everything and nothing, building a bond from the earliest days. Sarah flourished as a mother and partner. She managed their household with the same organizational skills she had once applied to bookkeeping, but she also made sure their home was filled with laughter and warmth. She taught the children to read and to be kind, to work hard and to appreciate the beauty around them. Marcus and Clara remained essential parts of their lives, and as the years passed, they became family in every way that mattered. Clara helped with the children regularly, and Marcus began teaching Matthew about ranching as the boy grew older and more capable. One evening in late summer of 1886, 5 years after they had married, Yates and Sarah sat on their porch watching the sun set while the children played in the yard under Clara's watchful eye. Matthew was now 6, Emma was 5, and Thomas was 3, and they were creating some elaborate game that involved a great deal of running and shouting. "Can you believe this is our life?" Sarah asked, leaning against Yates's shoulder. "Sometimes I look around and I have to pinch myself to make sure it is real." "I know what you mean," Yates said, wrapping his arm around her. 8 years ago I was alone in this house, thinking I was content with just the ranch and my work. I had no idea what I was missing. And 8 years ago I was stuck in a job I did not love in St. Louis, thinking my life was already mapped out for me. Sarah smiled. "And then my wagon broke down on a dusty road and everything changed." "Best broken wagon in history," Yates said, making Sarah laugh. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not come along that day?" Sarah asked. "What if you had been checking a different fence line, or what if you had decided not to help? I try not to think about that because it is too terrible to imagine." Yates tightened his arm around her. "But I believe things happen for a reason. I think we were meant to meet that day. I think all of this, our family and our life together, was always supposed to happen." "I believe that too," Sarah said softly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their children play, until suddenly a commotion from the yard drew their attention. Matthew had fallen and scraped his knee, and he was crying loudly while Emma tried to comfort him, and Thomas looked on with concern. Sarah rose to go help, but Yates gently pulled her back. "Let me," he said, kissing her forehead before heading down to the yard. He scooped Matthew up, examining the scrape and declaring it not too serious. "You are tough," he told his son. "A little scrape is not going to keep a Langston down for long." Matthew's tears subsided quickly, and soon he was ready to return to the game. Yates ruffled his hair, then bent down to address all 3 children. "Time to wash up for supper soon, but you can play for a little while longer." As he walked back to the porch, Sarah was watching him with an expression of such love it made his heart skip. "What?" he asked, settling back beside her. "Just thinking about what a wonderful father you are, how lucky these children are to have you." "I am the lucky one," Yates insisted. "Lucky to have you, lucky to have them, lucky to have this life. Every single day I count my blessings." The children grew and the ranch prospered. By the time Matthew was 10, he was genuinely helpful with the ranch work, capable of riding fence lines and helping move cattle. Emma showed an aptitude for numbers that reminded Yates of Sarah, and she began helping her mother with the account books. Thomas was still young but showed signs of having his father's love for horses. In 1888, when Sarah was 32 and Yates was 36, they welcomed their 4th and final child, a daughter they named Catherine. She completed their family, and Yates felt a sense of contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. Life was not without challenges. There were hard winters when they lost cattle, dry summers when water was scarce, injuries and illness that caused worry and fear. But they faced everything together, Sarah and Yates, supporting each other through difficulties and celebrating triumphs together. The children grew into good, capable people. Matthew developed a deep love for the land and announced his intention to take over the ranch someday. Emma talked about becoming a teacher, inspired by her mother's patient instruction. Thomas wanted to breed horses like his father. Catherine was still too young to know what she wanted, but she showed signs of having her mother's organizational mind and her father's determination. Stephen remained a constant presence in their lives. His general store became one of the most successful businesses in Salida, and he eventually married a widow named Helen who had 2 children of her own. The extended family would gather regularly for dinners and celebrations, and Yates loved watching his children play with their cousins. Marcus and Clara aged gracefully, remaining active on the ranch even as they grew older. They never had children of their own, but they poured their love into Yates and Sarah's family, becoming beloved figures to all 4 children. One autumn evening in 1895, 17 years after that fateful day when Yates found Sarah beside her broken wagon, they took a ride together to that meadow overlooking the valley, the same place where Yates had proposed. The children were old enough now to be left with Clara for a few hours, and it had been too long since they had time alone together. They spread a blanket and lay side by side, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Sarah's hair was now streaked with gray, and there were lines around Yates's eyes that had not been there when they met, but they were still deeply in love. Their bond strengthened rather than weakened by the years they had shared. "I have been thinking," Sarah said, lacing her fingers through Yates's, "about that day we met, about my wagon breaking down and you appearing like some kind of miracle. I was so scared that day, Yates, not just about the wagon, but about everything. I was traveling alone to a place I had never been to build a life I could not quite imagine. I felt so uncertain about everything." "You hit it well," Yates said. "You seemed brave and capable to me." "I was trying to be, but inside I was terrified. And then you came along, and you were so kind and helpful, and for the first time since leaving St. Louis, I felt like maybe everything was going to be all right." Sarah turned on her side to face him. "You saved me that day, Yates. Not just from a broken wagon, but from a life of loneliness and uncertainty. You gave me love and partnership and a family and a home. You gave me everything." Yates turned to face her as well, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "You saved me too, Sarah. I did not even know I needed saving, but I did. I was going through the motions of living without really understanding what life could be. You showed me. You brought color and warmth and meaning to my world. Everything good in my life comes from that day I found you on that road." They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 17 years of love and partnership and shared struggles and triumphs. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "Should we tell the children someday about how we met?" Sarah asked. "About the broken wagon and your rescue?" "We should tell them everything," Yates said. "About the wagon and the ranch and that first dinner with Stephen. About how scared we both were, but how we chose to be brave anyway. About how love can start in the most unexpected ways and grow into something more beautiful than we could have imagined." "I like that," Sarah said. "I want them to know that taking risks can lead to wonderful things, that saying yes to uncertainty can open doors we did not know existed." They stayed in that meadow until the stars were fully out, talking and remembering and dreaming about the future still ahead of them. They talked about watching Matthew take over the ranch someday, about Emma's plans to open a school, about Thomas's horse breeding business, about Catherine's future. They talked about growing old together, about grandchildren they might someday have, about all the years still stretching before them. When they finally rode back to the ranch, the house was blazing with lamplight, and they could see their children through the windows, safe and happy and loved. Yates helped Sarah down from her horse, and they stood for a moment just looking at the home they had built together. "Thank you," Sarah said suddenly. "For what?" "For stopping that day. For helping me with my wagon. For seeing me as more than just a stranded traveler. For loving me and building this life with me. For everything, Yates. Thank you for everything." Yates pulled her close, holding her tight. "Thank you for letting me help. For taking a chance on a rough rancher who did not know how to express what he was feeling. For choosing this life, choosing me, choosing us. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Sarah Langston, and I would live that day 1,000 times over if it meant ending up here with you." They walked into the house hand in hand, greeted by the cheerful chaos of their children all talking at once about their evening, and what Clara had made for dinner, and 100 other small details of daily life. Yates looked around at his family, at the life he and Sarah had created together, and felt a profound sense of gratitude and completion. This was what happiness looked like. This was what love built over years of shared effort and devotion could become. This was what he had found on a dusty road 17 years ago when he stopped to help a woman with a broken wagon, never imagining that he was actually finding his whole future. The years continued to pass, marked by the steady rhythm of ranch life and the milestones of their growing family. Matthew, at 18, was now a full partner in running the ranch, working alongside his father with a maturity and competence that made Yates proud every day. Emma, at 17, had indeed pursued her dream of teaching and was helping at the school in Salida several days a week. Thomas, now 15, was developing a reputation for training exceptional horses, and even Catherine, at 7, showed signs of being a formidable businesswoman someday, always negotiating for extra desserts or later bedtimes with logical arguments that reminded Yates of Sarah. In the spring of 1898, 20 years after their first meeting, Sarah suggested they host a celebration at the ranch. "An anniversary party," she explained. "Not of our wedding, but of that day we met. 20 years since a broken wagon changed both our lives forever." Yates loved the idea. They planned a large gathering, inviting everyone who had been part of their journey. Stephen and his family, Marcus and Clara, neighbors and friends from Salida, even the minister who had married them. The children threw themselves into preparations, and the week before the party, the ranch was a flurry of activity. On the day itself, the weather was perfect, warm but not hot, with a clear blue sky and gentle breeze. Tables were set up in the yard, loaded with food that Sarah and Clara and Emma had spent days preparing. Lanterns were hung from the porch and trees, ready to provide light as evening fell. The whole place looked magical, transformed for celebration. As guests arrived and the party got underway, Yates found himself standing on the porch with Sarah, watching the scene unfold. Matthew was helping Marcus set up for music, planning to play the fiddle his grandfather had once owned. Emma was organizing games for the younger children. Thomas was showing off his latest trained horse to an admiring crowd. Catherine was darting between groups, making sure everyone had what they needed. "Look what we made," Sarah said softly, gesturing at the gathering. "Not just our children, though they are wonderful, but this whole community. These friendships and connections, this life full of love and purpose. All because a wagon wheel broke," Yates marveled. all because I happened to be checking that particular fence line on that particular day. Do you really think it was chance? Sarah looked up at him. Or do you think maybe we were meant to meet? That all of this was always supposed to happen? I think I am too happy to question it too deeply, Yates said with a smile. However it happened, whatever forces brought us together, I am grateful. As the afternoon wore on, people began asking for the story of how Yates and Sarah met. The children, who had heard versions of it before, chimed in demanding to hear it again. And eventually, Yates found himself standing before the whole gathering, Sarah beside him, preparing to tell their tale. 20 years ago today, Yates began, I was checking fence lines on the western edge of this property. It was hot, I was tired, and I was planning to head home soon. Then I saw dust rising from the old trading road, and I rode over to investigate. He looked at Sarah. And there was this woman, standing beside a wagon with a broken wheel, trying to figure out how to fix it herself. I was terrified, Sarah added, picking up the story. My wagon had been fine one moment, then suddenly the wheel caught in a rut and the axle snapped. I was alone, hours from Salida, with no idea what to do. And then this cowboy appeared out of nowhere, tipping his hat and asking if I needed help. She looked at me like she was not sure if I was going to rob her or rescue her, Yates said with a laugh, and the crowd chuckled. To be fair, I did not know you yet, Sarah protested. But you were so kind and respectful. You examined the wagon, explained what needed to be fixed, and then offered to take me to your ranch where you had the tools to repair it properly. They continued the story together, trading off, talking about that first evening with Clara and Marcus, the work to fix the wagon, the dinner at Stephen's where Yates first admitted his feelings. The crowd listened raptly, especially the younger people who loved hearing romantic stories. And the moral of the story, Yates concluded, pulling Sarah close, is that sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected difficulties. That broken wagon was the best thing that ever happened to me because it brought me Sarah. And that broken wagon was the best thing that ever happened to me, Sarah added, because it brought me home to where I was meant to be. Everyone applauded, and then the music started and the real celebration began. There was dancing and eating and toasts to Yates and Sarah and their 20 years together. Matthew played his fiddle beautifully, and Emma sang, her clear voice carrying across the yard. Thomas convinced several young ladies to let him teach them about horses, and Catherine managed to organize a game of tag that had even some adults joining in. As the sun set and the lanterns were lit, creating pools of golden light across the yard, Yates and Sarah danced together just as they had at that first town celebration so many years ago. They moved slowly, holding each other close, while around them their family and friends celebrated the life they had built. I love you, Sarah whispered. Just as much now as I did when you proposed in that meadow, maybe even more. You have given me the most beautiful life, Yates. I love you too, Yates said. You are still the most extraordinary thing that ever happened to me. Every day with you is a gift. They kissed there in front of everyone, and the crowd cheered and whooped good-naturedly. When they broke apart, both of them were laughing, and Yates thought about how young they had been when they met, how uncertain about the future. Now here they were, 20 years later, surrounded by the life they had created together, and it was more than either of them could have dreamed possible. The party continued late into the night, but eventually guests began to depart, calling out thanks and congratulations as they left. Stephen was one of the last to go, embracing his sister tightly before shaking Yates's hand. "Thank you for making her so happy," Stephen said quietly. "When she first came west, I worried I had brought her into a hard life, but you gave her everything she deserved and more. I am the one who should be thanking you," Yates responded. "If you had not sent for her, if she had not made that journey, I never would have met her. So thank you, Stephen, for bringing your sister west." After everyone had left and the children had been sent to bed despite their protests, Yates and Sarah walked through the yard, extinguishing lanterns and straightening up the worst of the mess. The rest could wait until morning, but there was something peaceful about this quiet time together after all the excitement. "What a perfect day," Sarah said as they finally climbed the stairs to their bedroom. "I could not have asked for better." "It was perfect," Yates agreed. "Though every day with you is pretty close to perfect." They prepared for bed in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from 20 years of marriage, of knowing each other completely. As they settled under the covers, Sarah curled against Yates's side, fitting perfectly in the curve of his arm just as she always had. "Yates," Sarah said sleepily, "promise me something, anything. Promise me we will keep building this life together. Keep making memories and facing challenges and celebrating triumphs. Promise me we will keep choosing each other every day for all the years we have left." "I promise," Yates said, kissing the top of her head. "I will choose you every day for the rest of my life, Sarah. You are my partner, my love, my home. Nothing will ever change that." Sarah was quiet for a moment, and Yates thought she might have fallen asleep, but then she spoke again. "You know what the truly extraordinary thing is? It is not just that you helped me fix my wagon that day. The extraordinary thing is that you helped me fix myself. You helped me find the courage to be who I was meant to be, to build the life I was meant to live. You saw something in me that I did not even see in myself. You were always extraordinary, Sarah," Yates said softly. "I just got lucky enough to be there when you needed someone to see it." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in their love and their life together. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead and the river murmured its eternal song, and the Langston ranch settled into peaceful darkness. The years that followed brought their own joys and sorrows. Marcus passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1902, and Clara followed him 2 years later, their love story reaching its conclusion but their impact on the Langston family enduring forever. Stephen remained a vital part of their lives until his own passing in 1908, and Yates and Sarah helped raise his youngest daughter when Helen could not manage alone. The children grew into adults and started families of their own. Matthew married a woman named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch, and they had 4 children who grew up learning to work the land from their grandfather. Emma married the school teacher she had been working with, and they opened a larger school together in Salida that served the whole region. Thomas took over the horse breeding operation and expanded it into one of the most respected in Colorado. Catherine, true to her early promise, became a successful businesswoman, eventually taking over the store that Stephen had started and expanding it into a chain across the region. Through it all, Yates and Sarah remained each other's constant. They grew old together, their hair turning silver, their movements slower but their love undimmed by time. They became the patriarch and matriarch of a sprawling family, hosting gatherings where children and grandchildren, and eventually even great-grandchildren, would gather to hear stories about the old days. Yates's favorite story to tell the little ones was always about the broken wagon and the beautiful woman he found beside it. He would describe that hot August day in 1878, the dust and the sun, and the moment he first saw Sarah. He would talk about how helping someone in need had changed his entire life, how one act of kindness had led to decades of love and happiness. Sarah's favorite story was about their wedding day, about standing beside the river and promising to love Yates forever, about how scared and excited she had been, and how right it had all felt. She would tell the grandchildren about building a life from nothing, about hard work and dedication, and the importance of partnership. In the spring of 1928, 50 years after they first met, Yates and Sarah celebrated their golden wedding anniversary. The ranch was fuller than it had ever been, with family coming from all over Colorado and beyond. Matthew was now running the ranch entirely, though Yates still liked to ride out and check fence lines when his aging body allowed it. The house had been expanded and remodeled multiple times over the years, but the core of it remained the same, the place where Yates and Sarah had started their life together. At 76 years old, Yates moved slower than he once had, but his mind was sharp and his love for Sarah stronger than ever. At 72, Sarah's hands were gnarled with arthritis, making her beloved bookkeeping more difficult, but she still managed the family's finances with fierce dedication. On the actual day of their anniversary, they took a wagon ride out to that meadow, the place where Yates had proposed so many years ago. Their children had protested, worried the journey was too much for them, but Yates and Sarah had insisted. Some things were sacred, and this was one of them. They sat in the meadow together, holding hands and looking out over the valley that had been their home for 5 decades. The ranch stretched below them, prosperous and thriving under Matthew's management. In the distance, they could see Salida, grown from a small frontier town into a thriving city. 50 years, Sarah marveled. Half a century since a cowboy stopped to help a foolish woman who thought she could drive a wagon across Colorado by herself. Not foolish, Yates corrected gently. Brave. You were so brave, Sarah, even when you were scared. That was one of the first things I loved about you. We have had such a good life, Sarah said, tears streaming down her weathered face. So much love and joy and purpose. Our children, our grandchildren, this land, this family we built. I would not change a single moment of it. Neither would I, Yates said. Though if I am being honest, I might go back and propose sooner. I wasted too much time being nervous about your answer. Sarah laughed, the sound as beautiful to Yates now as it had been when they were young. You proposed at exactly the right moment. Everything happened exactly as it was meant to. They stayed in that meadow for hours, remembering and reminiscing, until finally the lengthening shadows told them it was time to head back. Yates helped Sarah into the wagon, moving slowly but still insistent on being the gentleman, and they made their way back to the ranch where their family waited. That evening, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Yates and Sarah received toasts and congratulations, and more love than two people should reasonably expect. Matthew made a speech about his parents' dedication to each other and to the ranch, about the example they had set for all of them. Emmer read a poem she had written about enduring love. Thomas presented them with a beautifully trained horse, a matched pair actually, as gentle as could be so they could still ride together. Catherine gave them a leather-bound book she had commissioned, filled with stories and memories and photographs from their 50 years together. As the celebration wound down and people began to drift toward home or bed, Yates and Sarah found themselves once again on the porch of the main house, sitting in rocking chairs that had been built specially for them by one of their grandsons. The night was warm and filled with the sounds of early summer, and above them the stars shone bright and steady. "Yates," Sarah said quietly, and there was something in her tone that made him turn to look at her carefully. "Yes, love. I want you to know that if I had to do it all over again, if I could go back to that day my wagon broke down, I would not change a thing. Every hardship we faced, every challenge we overcame, every moment of doubt or fear, it was all worth it, because it all led to this. To us, to our family, to this beautiful life. Yates felt tears prick his eyes. I feel the same way, Sarah. You are the best choice I ever made, the best thing that ever happened to me. Stopping to help you that day was the moment my real life began. They sat in companionable silence, rocking gently, hands clasped between their chairs. Inside the house, they could hear the murmur of family members still talking, and around them the ranch settled into its nighttime rhythms. You think they understand? Sarah asked. Our children and grandchildren, do you think they understand how special what we have is? I think they do, Yates said. I think they see it in the way we are with each other, in the life we built, in the family we created. We have shown them what love can be when you work for it, when you choose it every day. That is a legacy worth more than any amount of land or money. Sarah squeezed his hand. I am tired, Yates, so tired, but I am also so happy, so grateful for every moment we have had together. Me too, my love, Yates said softly. Me too. They sat together on that porch until the moon rose high overhead, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something extraordinary from a chance meeting on a dusty road. Their love had weathered 50 years of life's storms and celebrations, growing stronger rather than weaker with each passing season. When they finally rose to go inside, Yates helped Sarah to her feet, and they walked slowly to their bedroom, still hand in hand as they had been since that day in 1878 when their lives changed forever. They had promised to love each other in sunshine and shadow, in joy and sorrow, and they had kept that promise faithfully. In their bedroom, as they prepared for sleep, Sarah turned to Yates one more time. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For stopping that day. For helping me. For loving me. For building this life with me. For 50 years of partnership and devotion. For everything, Yates. Thank you for absolutely everything. Yates gathered her into his arms, holding her close. Thank you for letting me help. For taking a chance on me. For choosing this life, this ranch me. Thank you for 50 years of love and laughter and purpose. You made me into the man I became, Sarah. You gave my life meaning. They held each other for a long moment, and then they climbed into bed, settling into the comfortable positions they had occupied for 50 years. Sarah curled against Yates's chest, and he wrapped his arms around her, keeping her close and safe as he always had. I love you, Yates Langston, Sarah whispered. I love you, Sarah Langston, Yates replied. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the family they had created and the life they had built, secure in a love that had lasted 50 years and would endure forever in the hearts of those they left behind. The ranch they had built together would continue through their children and grandchildren, and the story of a cowboy who helped a woman fix her wagon and found his whole world would be told for generations to come. A testament to the extraordinary things that could bloom from the simplest acts of kindness.